Woman catches mother, grizzly bear, dragging heavy bag. The reason was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The crisp mountain air filled Olivia Reed's lungs as she stood on the rickety porch of her grandfather's cabin. The old wooden structure creaked beneath her feet, a haunting melody that accompanied the distant call of birds. Dawn was just breaking over the jagged peaks of the Montana wilderness, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold that reflected off the morning dew. She wrapped her worn flannel tighter around her shoulders, her breath visible in the early autumn chill. 3 weeks into her solitary retreat, Olivia had settled into a comfortable routine. Each morning began with a steaming cup of coffee and her camera, documenting the rebirth of a forest that had nearly been destroyed by wildfires 2 summers ago. The isolation was exactly what she needed after the accident that took her brother's life and left her questioning everything. Here, miles away from cell service and the pitying glances of friends, she could finally breathe. Olivia lifted her binoculars, scanning the tree line as she did every morning. The ritual had become almost meditative, checking for deer at the salt lick, watching the family of foxes that denned beneath a fallen pine, counting eagle pairs soaring above the valley. But today, something different caught her eye. A movement too large to be a deer, too deliberate to be the wind. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the porch boards. There, emerging from the shadowy undergrowth, was a massive grizzly bear. Its fur was the color of tarnished copper in the morning light, muscles rippling beneath its impressive bulk. But it wasn't the bear's size that had frozen Olivia in place. It was what the animal was doing. The grizzly was dragging something large and unnaturally shaped. From this distance, it looked like a heavy canvas bag, the kind hunters sometimes use to transport equipment. The bear moved with determination, pausing occasionally to readjust its grip on the object with surprisingly gentle movements of its powerful jaws. Olivia's hands trembled as she steadied the binoculars. The bear was female. That much was clear from her size and the visible teats that suggested she'd recently nursed cubs. But where were her young? And what was she doing with a man-made object deep in these woods? "This isn't right," Olivia whispered to herself, her voice sounding alien in the stillness. The bear continued its laborious journey, dragging the bag up a gentle slope toward a cluster of boulders that Olivia knew concealed several small caves. Something about the scene disturbed her deeply. Wild animals typically avoided human objects unless they contained food, but this bear was treating the bag with an almost reverent care. Against every safety protocol she knew, Olivia found herself reaching for her camera, her hiking boots, and the can of bear spray she kept by the door. Something was pulling her toward this mystery, the same reckless curiosity her brother had always teased her about. "One day, that need to know everything will get you in trouble, Liv," he'd said. Now his voice echoed in her mind as she stepped off the porch and into the forest. The pine needles cushioned her footsteps as she moved cautiously through the trees, keeping a safe distance behind the bear. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the animal would hear it. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings. Female grizzlies with cubs were among the most dangerous animals in these mountains. But something about the bear's behavior suggested this wasn't a normal situation. As Olivia drew closer, staying downwind and using trees as cover, she could make out more details of the bag. It was dark green canvas, military style, with frayed edges and what looked like a tear along one side. Something was protruding slightly from this opening. Was that fabric? The bear paused again, this time turning to look behind her, and Olivia ducked quickly behind a thick pine trunk, holding her breath. When she peered out again, she noticed something she'd missed before. The bear was injured. A dark stain matted the fur on her right shoulder, and she moved with a slight limp. Despite this, she continued her determined journey, dragging the heavy bag with singular focus. In the distance, a twig snapped. The bear's head jerked up, alert and tense. Olivia followed her gaze and spotted movement on the ridge above them. 3 men in hunting gear, moving through the trees with rifles. The bear growled low in her throat, then increased her pace, dragging the bag more urgently now. Olivia's mind raced. Hunting season hadn't officially started yet. What were armed men doing in this remote area? And why did the bear seem to recognize the threat they posed? As the grizzly disappeared around a rocky outcropping, Olivia made a decision that defied all logic. Instead of retreating to the safety of the cabin, she followed, drawn by a mystery that seemed to deepen with each passing moment. Little did she know that what she would discover in the next few minutes would change her understanding of the natural world forever. The forest seemed to close in around her as she crept forward, each step a silent negotiation with the wilderness. She could no longer see the bear, but the drag marks on the forest floor provided a clear trail. Pine needles swept aside, exposing dark soil beneath, occasional drops of blood marking the bear's painful journey. The morning light filtered through the canopy in dusty shafts, illuminating particles dancing in the air. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker's rhythmic tapping punctuated the silence. Rounding the outcropping, Olivia froze. The bear stood at the entrance to a small cave, her massive body silhouetted against the darkness within. The bag lay at her feet, and she was prodding it gently with her snout, making soft, huffing sounds that carried clearly in the still air. Something about those sounds struck Olivia as almost mournful. Using a fallen log as cover, Olivia raised her camera with trembling hands. The telephoto lens brought the scene into sharp focus. The bear's injury looked worse from this angle. A deep gash that could have been made by a bullet or a close encounter with a poacher's trap. Despite her obvious pain, the animal's movements remained gentle as she nudged the bag, trying to maneuver it into the cave. A sudden movement at the edge of Olivia's vision made her duck lower. One of the hunters had separated from his group and was making his way down the slope, closer to the bear's position. He moved with expert silence, clearly experienced in tracking. There was something deliberate about his movements that suggested he wasn't just a regular sportsman looking for game out of season. The man paused, lifting a radio to his mouth. Though too distant to hear his words, Olivia could see his expression, a cold determination that sent shivers down her spine. He checked his rifle, then continued his approach. Olivia's mind raced. Should she reveal herself? Create a distraction? The ethical dilemma tore at her. This was wild country, and natural law prevailed here. Yet something felt deeply wrong about this hunt, if that's what it was. The decision was taken from her when the bag at the bear's feet suddenly moved. Olivia's gasp was audible enough to make the bear's head snap in her direction. But the animal's attention quickly returned to the bag, which was now shifting more definitely. With exquisite care, that seemed impossible for such massive paws, the grizzly tore at the canvas, widening the rip along its side. What emerged first was a small, dark, brown paw. A cub. The bag contained a bear cub. But as more of the canvas tore away, Olivia's confusion only deepened. The creature emerging wasn't just any bear cub. Its fur was a startling, unnatural silvery white, almost luminescent in the dappled forest light. A spirit bear? Olivia whispered in disbelief. She'd heard stories of these rare genetic anomalies, Kermode bears, a subspecies of black bear with a recessive gene that turned their fur white. but they were native to coastal British Columbia, hundreds of miles west. Finding one here, carried by a grizzly, defied explanation. The cub wobbled on unsteady legs, clearly weak but alive. It let out a pitiful mewl that echoed off the rocks. The mother grizzly responded with a low, rumbling sound, nudging the white cub toward the cave entrance. Too captivated to maintain her caution, Olivia shifted position to get a better view. A dead branch snapped beneath her weight, the crack like a gunshot in the quiet forest. Both bears startled. The mother rose to her full height, nearly 9 feet tall, her roar shaking the very air. The cub scrambled awkwardly into the cave. Olivia pressed herself flat against the forest floor, heart thundering, certain she was about to die. But the bear's rage wasn't directed at her. The hunter had used the distraction to close the distance, and now stood less than 50 yards from the cave, rifle raised. "Got the target in sight," he spoke into his radio. "The package is confirmed alive. Moving in to extract." Package. Not animal, not cub. Package. The mother bear charged with surprising speed for her injured state. The hunter's rifle cracked once, twice. The massive animal stumbled but didn't fall, her momentum carrying her forward even as blood blossomed on her chest. Without thinking, Olivia raised her camera and pressed the shutter button repeatedly, the rapid clicks documenting the horrifying scene. The hunter fired again. This time, the bear collapsed heavily, just feet from her attacker. She wasn't dead. Olivia could see her sides heaving with labored breaths, but she was down. 2 more men appeared, jogging down the slope to join the first. "Jesus, Cooper, you were supposed to trank it, not kill it," one of them said, his voice carrying in the morning air. "Thing came at me like a freight train." The shooter, Cooper, replied defensively. "Besides, it's just a grizzly. The prize is in the cave. And it better be alive, or this whole operation was for nothing," said the third man, older than the others with silver hair and an air of authority. "The client is paying $3 million for a live specimen. Dead, it's worthless." "It's alive," Cooper assured him. "Saw it with my own eyes." The 3 men turned toward the cave, unaware of Olivia's presence. Her mind struggled to process what she was hearing. Someone had hired these men to capture the white cub. But why would a grizzly be protecting a spirit bear cub? And why would anyone pay millions for a live capture? As the men readied tranquilizer guns and approached the cave entrance, Olivia made another impulsive decision. Sliding her hand into her pocket, she found the small canister of air horn she carried for emergency signaling. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the button, unleashing a blast that echoed like thunder through the trees. Birds exploded from the canopy. The men spun around, weapons raised, searching for the source of the noise. In that moment of confusion, something unexpected happened. From the back of the cave, obscured in shadow until now, 2 more cubs emerged. Normal grizzly cubs, rushing to their fallen mother with distressed cries. And following them, a flash of silver white as the strange cub joined their huddle. The tableau struck Olivia with sudden clarity. The white bear wasn't just some random animal the grizzly had found. Somehow, impossibly, it was part of her family, an adopted member of her litter. The older man recovered first. "Ignore it. Probably just some hiker. Trank all of them. We'll sort it out when they're down." As Cooper raised his rifle again, a new sound cut through the forest. The mechanical whir of an approaching helicopter. The men looked up, momentarily distracted, and Olivia used that moment to press the air horn again, this time moving to a different position as she did so. "Someone's out there," the third man said nervously. "We need to hurry." Olivia fumbled with her phone, forgetting momentarily that there was no service here. But the camera still worked. She began filming, trying to capture the men's faces, The wounded bear, the cubs, huddled together, one brown, two silver-white. Wait, two? She blinked, certain her eyes were playing tricks. But no, there were indeed two white cubs now, nuzzling against their adoptive mother's fur, identical in their otherworldly coloring. Twins, rare beyond measure. The revelation hit her with the force of a physical blow. No wonder someone would pay millions. These weren't just any spirit bears, they were twins, a genetic miracle. And somehow, they'd ended up in the care of a grizzly mother, hundreds of miles from where they should exist. The helicopter sound grew louder, and through the trees, Olivia caught a glimpse of its black shape against the sky. The men were arguing now, gesturing urgently toward the cave, and then at the approaching aircraft. "We don't have time," the older man shouted over the noise. "Trank the white ones and let's go." Cooper raised his rifle again, aiming at the huddled cubs. Without conscious thought, Olivia found herself standing, stepping out from behind the log. "Stop!" she shouted, camera raised like a weapon. "I've recorded everything, who you are, what you're doing." The men froze, turning toward her with expressions ranging from shock to murderous rage. Cooper swung his rifle in her direction. "Put that down," he snarled. "I already uploaded the video," Olivia lied, her voice stronger than she felt. "If anything happens to me, it goes directly to the Forest Service and the FBI." It was a desperate bluff, but it bought her a moment as uncertainty flickered across their faces. That moment was enough. The helicopter wasn't just passing by, it was descending into a small clearing 100 yards away. Through the trees, Olivia could make out official markings. Forest Service. The older man swore viciously. "We're blown. Fall back to the secondary extraction point." Cooper hesitated, his rifle still trained on Olivia. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, she was certain he would shoot. Then the man with silver hair grabbed his arm. "Not worth it. We know where the bears are now. We can come back." With a final venomous glare, Cooper lowered his weapon. The three men melted into the forest with practiced efficiency, heading away from the approaching helicopter. As soon as they were out of sight, Olivia rushed to the fallen Grizzly. The bear's breathing was shallow, her eyes glazed with pain but still alert, still watching her cubs with fierce protectiveness. The three little ones, two white, one brown, huddled against her massive form, whimpering softly. "Help is coming," Olivia whispered, not knowing if the animal could understand her but needing to say the words anyway. "Just hold on." She turned her head at the sound of voices calling through the trees. Forest Service officers were approaching, drawn by the air horn blasts. Olivia stood, waving her arms to guide them. As they came into view, 4 uniformed officers moving cautiously through the underbrush. Olivia felt the adrenaline that had sustained her beginning to ebb. Her knees wobbled. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one of the officers called. Then, spotting the bear, "Holy, everyone stay back. That's a grizzly. She's injured," Olivia shouted back. "Poachers shot her. She's protecting cubs, special cubs. We need a wildlife vet right away." The officers approached more cautiously now, taking in the scene with professional assessment. One of them spoke rapidly into a radio, requesting medical support for an injured bear. "You're going to need to step away from the animal, ma'am," said the lead officer. A tall woman with her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Even wounded, she's extremely dangerous. Olivia nodded, backing away slowly. As she did, the officer's gaze fell on the cubs, and her professional composure slipped. "Are those white grizzly cubs?" she asked in disbelief. "I don't think they're grizzlies," Olivia explained quickly. "They look like Kermode bears, spirit bears, but they're hundreds of miles from their natural habitat, and somehow this mother grizzly is caring for them. The officer stared at the improbable family for a long moment before turning back to Olivia. "I'm Ranger Diane Blackwood. Can you tell me exactly what happened here?" As Olivia recounted the morning's events, more Forest Service personnel arrived, along with a man in civilian clothes who was introduced as Dr. Marcus Chen, a wildlife veterinarian. With practiced efficiency, he prepared a tranquilizer to safely sedate the injured bear so he could treat her wounds. "Will she survive?" Olivia asked anxiously as Dr. Chen worked. "The bullets missed her vital organs," he replied, his focus never leaving his patient. "She's lost blood, but these bears are incredibly resilient. I'm more concerned about what happens next." "What do you mean?" Dr. Chen glanced at the cubs, now sedated alongside their mother. "Those white cubs are a scientific anomaly. Spirit bears don't range this far east, and they're black bears, not grizzlies. The fact that they've been adopted by a grizzly mother, it's unprecedented." "Those men were trying to capture them," Olivia said. "They mentioned a client willing to pay millions." Ranger Blackwood, who had been listening nearby, stepped closer. "The illegal wildlife trade is booming. Rare specimens can fetch astronomical prices on the black market. These cubs would be the crown jewel of some billionaire's private collection." "But why were they in that bag?" Olivia asked, the question that had been nagging at her since the beginning. Why was the mother dragging them around instead of having them follow her like the grizzly cub? Dr. Chen and Ranger Blackwood exchanged a look that suggested they were wondering the same thing. "Ma'am, did you happen to get any photos of the men?" Ranger Blackwood asked. Olivia nodded, reaching for her camera. "And video, I got clear shots of their faces." As Olivia showed them the images, a spark of recognition flashed in the ranger's eyes. "That's Victor Zhao," she said, pointing to the silver-haired man. "He's been on our watch list for years, suspected of trafficking in endangered species across multiple continents, but he's always managed to stay one step ahead of prosecution." The implications settled over Olivia like a physical weight. "So, those men might have captured the spirit bear cubs from somewhere else, and this mother grizzly somehow rescued them?" The idea seemed far-fetched even as she said it, and yet the evidence was before them. A grizzly bear with wounds consistent with a confrontation, protectively caring for cubs that weren't her own species, and the presence of known wildlife traffickers. What other explanation could there be? Dr. Chen finished bandaging the sedated bear's wounds and stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I've heard stories from indigenous communities about bears adopting orphaned cubs from other mothers, even occasionally other species. But scientific documentation of cross-species adoption is extremely rare, especially between different bear species." He looked thoughtfully at the sleeping family. "What we're seeing here challenges a lot of what we think we know about animal behavior. This grizzly didn't just tolerate these alien cubs. She fought for them, risked her life for them. That suggests a level of cognitive decision-making and emotional attachment that goes beyond simple instinct." Olivia's attention was suddenly drawn to something glinting in the dirt near the torn canvas bag. She walked over and knelt down, carefully brushing away pine needles to reveal a small metal object. "What is that?" Ranger Blackwood asked, coming to stand beside her. Olivia picked it up, turning it over in her palm. "It looks like some kind of tracking device." The ranger took it, examining it closely. Advanced GPS tracker, military grade. They were monitoring the bear's movements. "But why put a tracker on cubs they were trying to capture?" Olivia asked. "That doesn't make sense." Before anyone could respond, one of the other rangers approached quickly, "Diane, we found something at the helicopter landing site. You're going to want to see this." Ranger Blackwood nodded. "Stay with Dr. Chen," she told Olivia, then followed her colleague into the trees. Left alone with the veterinarian and the sedated bears, Olivia felt a strange calm settle over her. She watched as Dr. Chen checked the cubs, his experienced hands gentle as he examined each one. "No injuries on any of the little ones," he reported. "They're dehydrated and hungry, but otherwise healthy." "What will happen to them now?" Olivia asked. Dr. Chen sighed, sitting back on his heels. "That's a complicated question. Normally, we try to keep wild animals wild, minimizing human intervention. But this situation is anything but normal." He looked at the strange, mismatched family with something like wonder in his eyes. "Those spirit bear cubs need protection, not just from poachers but for scientific study. They represent a genetic anomaly that could teach us a great deal about bear evolution and adaptation." "You'd separate them from their mother?" Olivia couldn't keep the dismay from her voice. "She's not their biological mother," Dr. Chen reminded her gently. "And while this adoption behavior is fascinating, we have to consider what's best for their long-term survival." Olivia opened her mouth to argue, but was interrupted by Ranger Blackwood's return. The ranger's expression was grim, her earlier professional calm replaced by tightly controlled anger. "We found a campsite," she said without preamble. "Recent. Evidence suggests the poachers have been operating in this area for at least a week, and we found this." She held up a plastic evidence bag containing what looked like a hypodermic dart. "Tranquilizer?" Dr. Chen asked, reaching for the bag. "Yes, but not the standard wildlife management formula. This is something much more potent, and it's mixed with a compound I've never seen before." "Could it be what they used on the cubs?" Olivia suggested. Ranger Blackwood nodded slowly. "That's our working theory, but there's more. We found tracks leading to and from a nearby stream. Blood trails, signs of a struggle." "Another bear?" Dr. Chen asked sharply. "We think so, and based on the evidence, we believe it might have been the spirit cub's biological mother." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Olivia looked at the sleeping Grizzly, her massive body curled protectively around cubs that weren't her own, and felt something twist painfully in her chest. "She killed her," she whispered. "The poachers killed the cub's real mother, and this Grizzly somehow found them afterward." "It's just a theory at this point," Ranger Blackwood cautioned. "But it fits the evidence. The poachers may have tranquilized a mother spirit bear, harvested the cubs, and disposed of her. But somehow they lost control of the situation." "The Grizzly," Dr. Chen said with sudden understanding. "She could have encountered them during or after the operation, become aggressive." "And in the chaos, she ended up with the cubs," Olivia finished. "That's why she was dragging them in that bag. She found them in it, or put them in it herself, trying to move them to safety." The three of them stood in silence, contemplating the remarkable chain of events that had brought this unlikely family together. A mother's death, another mother's intervention, a desperate flight through the forest with precious cargo, all culminating in this moment. Dr. Chen was the first to break the silence. "The sedatives will wear off in a few hours. We need to decide what to do before then. Protocol would dictate we transport the spirit cubs to a wildlife rehabilitation center," Ranger Blackwood said, "possibly with the intention of eventually relocating them to their natural habitat in British Columbia." "And the Grizzly?" Olivia asked. "Treated, then released back into the wild once her wounds heal. The Grizzly cub would stay with her." Something about the clinical detachment of this plan made Olivia's heart ache. She thought of her brother, of loss and found family. of the strange bonds that formed in the aftermath of tragedy. "What if that's not the right thing?" she asked quietly. Both professionals turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Ranger Blackwood asked. Olivia gestured toward the sleeping bears. "Look at them. That grizzly risked her life for cubs that aren't even her species. She adopted them, protected them. In return, they've accepted her as their mother. Breaking that bond, it feels wrong." "Ms. Reed," Dr. Chen said gently, "I understand your emotional response to this situation, but wildlife management decisions have to be based on scientific principles, not sentiment." "Is it just sentiment?" Olivia challenged. "You said yourself this is unprecedented behavior. Doesn't that make it worthy of study? What might we learn if we allowed this unusual family to stay together, under observation?" Dr. Chen and Ranger Blackwood exchanged thoughtful looks. "It would be highly unconventional," the ranger said slowly. "So is a grizzly adopting spirit bear cubs," Olivia pointed out. "Maybe conventional thinking doesn't apply here." Before either could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. "She's right." They all turned to see an older man approaching through the trees. He wore the uniform of a senior Forest Service official, with the additional patches that suggested special authority. Despite his age, Olivia guessed him to be in his 60s. He moved with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the wilderness. "Director Hayes?" Ranger Blackwood straightened visibly. "I didn't expect you on site." "When I heard the report, I had to see for myself," the director replied, his eyes fixed on the sleeping bears. 30 years in wildlife management, and I've never encountered anything like this." He moved closer, kneeling beside the grizzly with a lack of fear that spoke of long experience. "She's beautiful," he murmured, then looked up at Olivia. "You witnessed this whole thing?" Olivia nodded, explaining again what she had seen that morning. Director Hayes listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed a sharp mind and deep knowledge of bear behavior. When she finished, he remained silent for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "The woman has a point," he said finally. "This situation offers a unique research opportunity. Cross-species adoption among large predators is rarely documented, let alone between different bear species." "What are you suggesting, sir?" Ranger Blackwood asked. "I'm suggesting we consider an alternative to standard protocol." He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "These bears have already formed a family unit. The mother grizzly has demonstrated extraordinary protective behavior toward the spirit bear cubs. Breaking that bond could be traumatic for all involved. But the spirit bears aren't native to this ecosystem," Dr. Chen pointed out. "Their specialized feeding patterns, their evolutionary adaptations, they're meant for the coastal rainforests." "Bears are adaptable," Director Hayes countered. "And these cubs are young enough that they'll learn to forage in this environment from their adoptive mother." He turned to Olivia. "You said your cabin is nearby?" She nodded, surprised by the question. "About a mile from here, it's my grandfather's property. 80 acres backing up to national forest land. Private land adjacent to protected wilderness," Hayes mused. "That could work in our favor. Would you be willing to allow us to establish a monitoring station on your property? A place where researchers could observe these bears without intruding on their natural behavior?" Olivia blinked, taken aback by the unexpected request. Yes, of course. But I'm only here temporarily. My grandfather, we can work out the details," Hayes assured her. "The important thing is that we have a rare opportunity here, not just to protect an unusual family of bears, but to learn from them." He addressed Dr. Chen and Ranger Blackwood. "I propose we establish a perimeter around this area. No hunting, no tourism, minimal human interaction. We install wildlife cameras, tracking collars on the mother after she recovers, and set up a small research team to monitor their progress. And the poachers? Ranger Blackwood asked. They know about the cubs. They'll be back. Not if we catch them first, Hayes said grimly. The photos and video Miss Reed captured will help identify them. In the meantime, we'll keep a constant watch on these bears. No one will get near them without us knowing. Dr. Chen looked skeptical. This is highly unusual protocol, sir. So are white grizzly cubs, Hayes replied with a slight smile. Sometimes nature surprises us. Our job is to adapt accordingly. The veterinarian considered this, then nodded slowly. I suppose a controlled observation study could yield valuable data on interspecies relationships among bears. Exactly, Hayes said, then turned back to Olivia. And we'll need your help. You've already gained the trust of these bears in a way. Your observations could be invaluable. Olivia felt a surge of unexpected emotion. For weeks, she had been hiding from life, from connection, using her grief as a shield. Now, suddenly, she was being pulled back into something vital and important, something bigger than herself. I'll help however I can, she promised. As if in response to her words, the mother grizzly stirred slightly, her massive paw moving protectively over her mismatched cubs even in sleep. The gesture, so tender from an animal capable of such ferocity, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. In that moment, watching this improbable family brought together by tragedy and chance, Olivia felt a connection to her own loss, and perhaps the first fragile tendrils of healing. What she didn't know, as she stood in that quiet clearing with the morning sun climbing higher in the sky, was that the mystery of the spirit bear cubs was far deeper than anyone realized. The truth would challenge not just their understanding of animal behavior, but the very boundaries between the natural world and something much more inexplicable. And somewhere in the forest, 3 men were already planning their return. Dawn broke over the Montana wilderness 2 days later, painting the mountains with gentle gold light. In the makeshift research camp that had sprung up near Olivia's cabin, activity had been constant since the discovery of the unusual bear family. Canvas tents housed sophisticated monitoring equipment, a medical station for Dr. Chen, and temporary quarters for the small team of wildlife experts Director Hayes had assembled with remarkable speed. Olivia sat on a fallen log at the edge of camp, nursing a cup of coffee as she reviewed the footage from the remote cameras they'd installed around the cave where the bear family had taken shelter. The mother grizzly's wounds were healing well. Dr. Chen had been pleasantly surprised by her resilience, and she had begun venturing out to forage, always keeping her 3 cubs close. Anything interesting on the night feeds? Ranger Blackwood asked, joining Olivia with her own steaming mug. She caught a rabbit around midnight, Olivia replied, tilting the tablet screen to show the grainy night vision footage. Brought it back to the cave and actually divided it among all 3 cubs. The little brown one got the largest share. Ranger Blackwood. Diane, please. She'd insisted after the first day of working together. Watched the footage with a thoughtful expression. Preferential feeding for the biological offspring would be the expected behavior, but she seems to be treating all 3 cubs equally. If anything, she's more protective of the white ones, Olivia observed. Watch here. She swiped to a different video clip that showed the mother positioning herself between the spirit bear cubs and the cave entrance whenever an unfamiliar sound occurred. Fascinating, Diane murmured. It contradicts everything we understand about selective maternal investment in wildlife. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the bear family's morning routine unfold on the screen. Over the past 2 days, Olivia had found an unexpected ally in the serious, dedicated ranger. beneath Diane's professional exterior was a woman deeply passionate about wildlife conservation, with a particular fondness for bears that matched Olivia's own growing attachment to the unusual family. "The director wants to collar her today," Diane said after a while, her tone suggesting she had mixed feelings about the procedure. Olivia looked up sharply. "Is that safe? Her wounds—" "Dr. Chen says she's strong enough for a brief sedation," Diane assured her. "And the collar is essential for tracking their movements once they leave the cave area, which could happen any day now." Olivia nodded reluctantly. She understood the scientific necessity, but it still felt like an intrusion on the fragile peace the bear family had found. The quiet moment was broken by the arrival of Dr. Chen, followed by a lanky young man Olivia hadn't met before. He carried himself with the awkward enthusiasm of a graduate student, clutching a tablet to his chest like a shield. "Miss Reed," Dr. Chen greeted her. "This is Noah Patel, a PhD candidate from the University of Washington. He's our resident expert on spirit bears." Noah stepped forward, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose before extending his hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Miss Reed. Your photographs of the bears are extraordinary." Olivia shook his hand, noting the genuine excitement in his eyes. "Noah, and please, call me Olivia." "Noah has been studying the Kermode bear population in British Columbia for 3 years," Dr. Chen explained. "When Director Hayes reached out to the university about our situation here, Noah was the obvious choice to consult." The young researcher shifted from foot to foot, clearly bursting to share his thoughts. "I've been reviewing all the footage and Dr. Chen's medical assessments, and I have to say, this situation is unprecedented in documented bear behavior. Cross-species adoption is rare enough, but between different bear species, with this level of maternal investment, it's revolutionary." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Olivia found herself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. "So, what do you make of it? Why would a grizzly adopt spirit bear cubs?" Noah's expression turned more serious. "That's the question, isn't it? The simplest explanation is that she encountered the cubs after their biological mother was killed, and her maternal instincts overrode species recognition. Bears can occasionally adopt orphaned cubs of their own species, though it's uncommon." "But different species?" Diane pressed. "That's where it gets interesting," Noah admitted. "These aren't just any bears. They're Kermode bears, spirit bears. They're revered in indigenous cultures throughout the Pacific Northwest. The Tsimshian people believe they have special powers, that they can cross between the physical and spiritual worlds." Dr. Chen made a small noise that might have been skepticism. Noah hurried on. "I'm not suggesting we accept supernatural explanations, of course, but there might be something about these cubs, a pheromone signal perhaps, or some behavioral trait that triggered an unusually strong protective response in the grizzly. Or maybe she's just compassionate," Olivia suggested quietly. "Maybe she saw suffering and responded to it, the way any mother might." The 3 professionals exchanged glances, and Olivia felt suddenly self-conscious about anthropomorphizing the bear's behavior. But before anyone could respond, a commotion from the main camp drew their attention. Director Hayes was striding toward them, accompanied by a tall, elegant woman whose formal attire looked wildly out of place in the wilderness setting. Despite being in her 60s, she moved with a dancer's grace, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun that reminded Olivia of a ballet instructor. "Dr. Chen, Ranger Blackwood," Hayes called as they approached. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Eleanor Kingsley from the National Science Foundation. She's here to evaluate our research proposal." Diane straightened visibly, while Dr. Chen stepped forward to shake the woman's hand. Olivia hung back, suddenly aware of her rumpled flannel shirt and dirt-smudged jeans. "Director Hayes has briefed me on your unusual situation," Dr. Kingsley said, her crisp British accent adding to her air of authority. "I must say, I was skeptical until I reviewed the photographic evidence Ms. Reed provided." Her sharp eyes found Olivia. "Extraordinary work, by the way. Those images capture something quite remarkable." "Thank you," Olivia murmured, surprised by the compliment. "Dr. Kingsley is considering emergency funding for a long-term study," Director Hayes explained. "The NSF has a special interest in anomalous wildlife behavior, particularly involving endangered or protected species." "Which the Kermode bear certainly is," Noah interjected eagerly, then flushed when everyone turned to look at him. "Sorry, I'm Noah Patel from the University of Washington. I specialize in spirit bear conservation genetics. Yes," Dr. Kingsley finished for him, offering a small smile. "I'm familiar with your work on the MC1R gene mutation. Very promising research." Noah looked both flustered and pleased by the recognition. Dr. Kingsley turned her attention back to the group at large. "I'd like to see the bears myself, if possible, and then discuss the parameters of what a comprehensive study might entail." Dr. Chen nodded. "We're planning to collar the mother today. If you'd like to observe the procedure, it would give you an opportunity to see the family up close, under controlled conditions." "Excellent," Dr. Kingsley said briskly. "And Ms. Reed, I hope you'll continue documenting this situation. Your perspective as the initial observer is invaluable." Before Olivia could respond, her satellite phone, the only reliable communication device at the remote cabin, rang shrilly. She excused herself and stepped away to answer it. "Ms. Reed?" An unfamiliar male voice greeted her. "This is Agent Dominic Vega with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I understand you recently had an encounter with suspected wildlife traffickers." Olivia's pulse quickened. "Yes, that's right. I provided photos and video to the Forest Service." "I've reviewed that evidence," Agent Vega replied. "We've identified the men as members of an international wildlife trafficking syndicate we've been tracking for years. The leader, Victor Zhao, specializes in rare and exotic species for private collectors." "They mentioned a client willing to pay millions for the cubs," Olivia recalled. "That tracks with what we know," Vega confirmed. "My team has been monitoring chatter on known black market channels. There's been increased activity in the last 48 hours. Mentions of white treasure and Montana acquisition. We have reason to believe they're planning another attempt." A chill ran down Olivia's spine. "When?" "Soon. Possibly within the next day or two." The agent's voice was grim. "I'm en route to your location now with a tactical team, but we're still 6 hours out. In the meantime, I've alerted local authorities to increase patrols in the area." "I'll tell Director Hayes," Olivia promised. "We're actually preparing to sedate the mother bear for a tracking collar procedure." "That might complicate things," Vega said thoughtfully. "A sedated bear can't protect her cubs. If Zhao's people have been monitoring your activities, and we have to assume they have, they might see that as an ideal opportunity to make their move." Olivia's mind raced. "I'll warn the team. How can I reach you if anything happens?" Agent Vega provided his direct number, then added, "Be careful, Ms. Reed. These aren't ordinary poachers. They're organized, well-funded, and dangerous. They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way." The call ended, leaving Olivia with a knot of dread in her stomach. She hurried back to the group, where preparations for the collaring procedure were already underway. Dr. Chen was explaining the process to Dr. Kingsley, while Noah organized equipment and Diane checked the tranquilizer rifle. "Director Hayes," Olivia interrupted urgently, I just received a call from a Fish and Wildlife Service agent. The poachers are planning another attempt to take the cubs, possibly today. Hayes's expression darkened. Are they certain? Olivia quickly relayed what Agent Vega had told her. The atmosphere in the camp shifted immediately, the scientific focus giving way to security concerns. We should postpone the collaring, Diane suggested, looking to Hayes. If we sedate the mother, the cubs will be vulnerable. But if we don't collar her, we risk losing track of them entirely if they move deeper into the wilderness, Dr. Chen countered. The tracking data is essential for the research project. Dr. Kingsley observed this exchange with keen interest. Perhaps there's a compromise. Proceed with the collaring, but with enhanced security measures. I have 4 rangers on site, Hayes said thoughtfully. We could position them around the perimeter during the procedure. That might not be enough, Olivia warned. The agent described these people as a sophisticated criminal organization, not opportunistic poachers. Hayes rubbed his chin thoughtfully. What do you suggest, Miss Reed? The question caught Olivia off guard. She wasn't a wildlife professional or law enforcement expert, but she had been the first to encounter this situation, and somehow that had given her a voice in what happened next. I think, she said slowly, we need to consider what's best for the bears, not just for the research. If there's any risk to the cubs, we should wait until Agent Vega's team arrives. Hayes nodded, considering her words. Dr. Kingsley, I apologize for the complication. Your time is valuable. On the contrary, the British woman interrupted, this development only underscores the urgency of establishing proper protections for these remarkable animals. I'm prepared to wait if it means ensuring their safety. Relief washed over Olivia. For a moment, it seemed the crisis had been averted. Then a sharp crack echoed through the forest, a sound Olivia recognized instantly as a rifle shot. Everyone froze. In the terrible silence that followed, they heard something that made their blood run cold, the distant, anguished roar of a wounded grizzly bear. They're already here, Diane whispered. Hayes sprang into action. Blackwood, get your rangers. Dr. Chen, emergency medical kit for the bear. Everyone else, stay in camp. But Olivia was already running toward the sound, camera in hand, ignoring the shouts behind her. The forest blurred around her as she followed the faint trail to the bear's cave. She had spent hours observing them, photographing them, feeling a connection grow with each passing day. The thought of those cubs in the hands of traffickers, or worse, the mother bear dying as she had feared would happen that first morning, drove her forward with reckless speed. She reached the clearing near the cave entrance and skidded to a halt, taking cover behind a large pine. The scene before her was chaotic. The mother grizzly was on her feet, swaying slightly with a tranquilizer dart protruding from her flank. Despite her drugged state, she stood protectively in front of the cave, roaring her defiance at 2 men who were attempting to circle around her from opposite directions. Olivia recognized Cooper, the shooter from their first encounter. The other man was younger, wiry and quick, wielding what looked like a catchpole of the kind used by animal control officers. Of the silver-haired leader, Zhao, there was no sign. "Take the shot, damn it!" the younger man shouted. "She's not going down fast enough." Cooper raised his rifle again, but the bear charged suddenly, with surprising speed for her impaired state. The man barely managed to dodge behind a boulder, firing another dart as he moved. It struck the bear's shoulder, causing her to stumble briefly before regaining her footing. 2 darts should put her down, Cooper called. Just wait. The bear roared again, but it was weaker now. She took an unsteady step backward, then another, still blocking the cave entrance where her cubs were hidden. Olivia could hear their frightened whimpers echoing from within. Raising her camera, she began documenting the scene, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Where were Hayes and the Rangers? They should have heard the commotion by now. As if in answer to her unspoken question, she heard movement in the trees behind her. Turning, hoping to see Diane or the other Forest Service personnel, she instead found herself face to face with Victor Zhao. The man smiled coldly, a hunting knife gleaming in his hand. "Ms. Reed, I believe? How fortunate. You've caused us quite a bit of trouble." Olivia backed away, her camera still raised like a shield. "The authorities are on their way. Fish and Wildlife Service agents, armed rangers. You won't get away this time." Zhao seemed unperturbed by this information. "By the time they arrive, we'll be gone, along with our prizes." His eyes flicked to the cave, where the mother bear was now visibly struggling to remain standing, her movements growing sluggish as the tranquilizers took effect. "They're just cubs," Olivia said desperately. "Wild animals that belong in the forest, not in some collector's private zoo." "They are far more than just cubs," Zhao replied, his voice taking on a reverential quality that Olivia found more disturbing than his earlier coldness. "Do you have any idea what makes these particular specimens so valuable?" When Olivia didn't respond, he continued, "The Kermode bear, the spirit bear, occurs in approximately 1 in 10 black bears along the British Columbia coast. A genetic anomaly, beautiful but not unheard of. But 2 cubs with the trait, born to the same mother, the odds are astronomical. So, they're rare. It doesn't give you the right to steal them from the wild." Zhao's smile widened. "Oh, Ms. Reed, these cubs aren't merely rare, they're unique. Their DNA contains a variant of the MC1R gene that we've never seen before. A mutation of a mutation, if you will." Olivia frowned. "How would you know that? You haven't even captured them yet." "Ah, but we have studied them. Their mother, their real mother, provided us with valuable samples before her unfortunate demise." The casual cruelty of his words made Olivia's stomach turn. "You killed her." "A regrettable necessity," Zhao said with a shrug. "But her cubs, they're worth far more than you can imagine. Not just to collectors, but to certain research interests. Their genetic makeup holds tremendous potential for applications in human medicine." A terrible understanding began to dawn on Olivia. This isn't just about exotic pets for the wealthy. You're selling them for experimentation. "Selling is such a crude term," Zhao replied. "I prefer to think of it as facilitating scientific progress. The highest bidder happens to be a pharmaceutical research division with very deep pockets." Behind him, Olivia could see the mother bear finally collapse to her knees, still stubbornly positioned in front of the cave entrance. Cooper and his partner were approaching cautiously, tranquilizer guns trained on her massive form. "You won't get away with this," Olivia said, raising her voice in the hope that it might carry to Hayes or the Rangers, wherever they were. "These bears are now part of a federal research project. Taking them is a serious federal offense." Zhao's expression hardened. "Enough conversation. Step aside, Ms. Reed. I have no desire to harm you, but I will if necessary." Olivia stood her ground, mind racing. Where was the backup? Had something happened to Hayes and the others? She had only one advantage. Zhao seemed to want to avoid violence if possible, likely to prevent drawing more attention to their operation. "I've already transmitted images of you and your men to the authorities," she lied, slowly raising her camera. "And I'm recording this conversation right now. If anything happens to me, they'll know exactly who was responsible." Doubt flickered across Zhao's face, but only momentarily. "A bluff, Miss Reed. There's no cell service here, and satellite transmission would require equipment you don't have." He was right, of course. but the brief exchange had bought her a few precious seconds, enough time to notice movement in the trees behind Zhao. A flash of a Forest Service uniform, Diane moving silently into position. Olivia needed to keep Zhao's attention. "Why here?" she asked. "Why Montana?" "Spirit bears aren't native to this region." "An excellent question," Zhao replied, seemingly pleased by her interest despite the circumstances. The mother bear, the true mother, was part of a covert rewilding experiment. A small population of Kermode bears released in this ecosystem 5 years ago to study their adaptability. Off the books, unauthorized by federal agencies. When we learned of it through our contacts, we realized the potential value. Who would conduct an unauthorized rewilding experiment? Olivia asked, genuinely puzzled despite the danger. Zhao's smile turned cryptic. Who indeed? Perhaps you should ask your new friends at the Forest Service about Project Lazarus. Before Olivia could process this strange statement, several things happened at once. The mother, Grizzly, with one final surge of desperate strength, rose to her feet and charged Cooper, who fired wildly, missing his target. Diane burst from cover behind Zhao, her service weapon drawn, and from the direction of the camp came shouts and the sound of approaching reinforcements. Chaos erupted in the small clearing. Zhao spun around, knife still in hand, but Diane was faster, tackling him to the ground with practiced efficiency. The Grizzly collided with Cooper, sending him flying into a tree trunk with a sickening crack before she finally collapsed, the tranquilizers overwhelming even her extraordinary will. The second poacher froze, caught between the approaching rangers and the unconscious bear. He made a break for the trees, but ran straight into the solid form of Director Hayes, who emerged from the forest with a rifle trained on his chest. "Federal agents! On the ground now!" Hayes barked, all trace of the thoughtful scientist gone, replaced by the commanding presence of a law enforcement officer. The poacher complied, dropping to his knees with his hands raised. Within moments, the clearing was filled with rangers securing the scene, checking the fallen bear, and ensuring the cubs remained safely in their cave. Olivia stood motionless, camera still clutched in her hands, trying to make sense of what had just happened, and of Zhao's cryptic words about Project Lazarus. She watched as Diane efficiently handcuffed the trafficker, reciting his rights with cold precision. "Are you all right?" Dr. Chen appeared at her side, medical kit in hand. "Were you hurt?" Olivia shook her head numbly. "I'm fine. The bear—" "I'll see to her now," he assured her, already moving toward the unconscious Grizzly. The darts they used appeared to be standard tranquilizers, fortunately, not the unknown compound we found at their camp. Director Hayes approached, his expression grim. "Ms. Reed, that was incredibly reckless. You could have been killed." "I couldn't just wait in camp," she replied, finding her voice. "Not when they were in danger." Hayes studied her for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Your actions may have given Ranger Blackwood the opportunity she needed to apprehend Zhao, but please, leave the law enforcement to the professionals in the future." As he turned away to coordinate with the other rangers, Olivia called after him. "Director, what is Project Lazarus?" Hayes stopped mid-stride, his back to her. For a long moment he didn't move or speak. When he finally turned, his expression was carefully neutral. "Where did you hear that name?" Zhao mentioned it. He said the spirit bears were part of an unauthorized rewilding experiment called Project Lazarus. Hayes's eyes narrowed slightly. "Victor Zhao is a criminal and a liar, Miss Reed. I wouldn't put much stock in anything he says." With that, he walked away, leaving Olivia with the distinct feeling that he had avoided answering her question. Dr. Chen was now examining the mother Grizzly, his movements gentle but efficient. Noah had appeared from somewhere and was peering anxiously into the cave, speaking softly to the frightened cubs within. "They seem unharmed," he reported, relief evident in his voice. "Just scared." Dr. Kingsley stood at the edge of the clearing, observing everything with keen eyes. When she noticed Olivia watching her, she approached, her expression thoughtful. "Quite the dramatic turn of events," she remarked. "You handled yourself admirably, Miss Reed." "Thank you," Olivia said, still distracted by Hayes's reaction to her question. "Dr. Kingsley, have you ever heard of something called Project Lazarus?" The scientist's eyes widened fractionally, so briefly that Olivia might have imagined it if she hadn't been watching closely. "I can't say that I have," she replied smoothly. "Why do you ask?" "Just something Zhao mentioned," Olivia said, deciding not to press further for now. "Probably nothing." "Indeed." Dr. Kingsley glanced toward the activity around the sedated bear. "It appears Dr. Chen has things well in hand. Perhaps we should return to camp and allow him space to work." As they walked back together, Olivia found her thoughts returning to Zhao's words. An unauthorized rewilding experiment. Spirit bears introduced to Montana deliberately, not by some freak accident or extraordinary adoption. And Project Lazarus, a name that had clearly meant something to both Hayes and Kingsley, despite their denials. The mystery of the bear family had just grown deeper, and Olivia was beginning to suspect that the wildlife trafficking attempt was only the surface of a much more complex situation. Whatever was happening here in the remote Montana wilderness, it seemed that not everyone involved was being entirely truthful. Back at the camp, Agent Vega and his team had arrived earlier than expected, and were now coordinating with the Forest Service rangers to process the captured poachers. Olivia provided a detailed statement about her encounter with Gio, careful to include his claim about the rewilding experiment, but omitting her questions to Hayes and Kingsley about Project Lazarus. Something told her to keep that particular detail to herself for now. As evening approached, Dr. Chen returned to camp with positive news about the mother Grizzly. "She's recovering well from the tranquilizers. No lasting damage from the darting, and I took the opportunity to attach our tracking collar while she was sedated." "And the cubs?" Olivia asked anxiously. All three appeared to be in excellent health. They remained in the cave during the procedure, but emerged to rejoin their mother as she began to wake. He smiled slightly. "It seems their bond is as strong as ever." Relief washed over Olivia. Despite the day's dangers, the unusual family had survived intact. But as she sat by the campfire that night, watching the flames dance against the darkening sky, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't out of danger yet, and that the threat might not come only from poachers. Across the fire, Director Hayes was deep in conversation with Dr. Kingsley, their voices too low to overhear. But their expressions were serious, and occasionally one of them would glance in Olivia's direction, then quickly look away when they noticed her watching. They were hiding something connected to the spirit bear cubs and this mysterious Project Lazarus, and Olivia was determined to find out what it was. Later that night, as the camp settled into silence, Olivia lay awake in her tent, turning over the day's events in her mind. The sound of soft footsteps outside drew her attention. Peering through the tent flap, she saw Noah Patel making his way stealthily toward the equipment tent, a satellite phone clutched in his hand. Curious, Olivia slipped from her sleeping bag and followed, keeping to the shadows. She watched as Noah entered the tent, then positioned herself near a small gap in the canvas where a sliver of light escaped. "Confirmed both cubs carry the variant," Noah was saying to someone on the phone, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, exactly as predicted. The synthetic gene has expressed perfectly." Olivia froze, straining to hear more. Noah continued after a pause, but actually provides excellent cover for the project. Everyone's so focused on the cross-species dynamic that they're not asking questions about the cub's origins. Another pause. No, I don't think so. Reed seems completely convinced by the trafficking narrative. Hayes is maintaining protocol. Kingsley's presence complicates things, but she's contained for now. Noah listened for a moment, then replied, "Understood. I'll collect the samples tomorrow and find a secure way to transmit the data, but we should accelerate the extraction timeline. After today's incident, security will be tighter." Extraction timeline? Samples? Synthetic gene? Olivia's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. "Don't worry," Noah assured his mysterious caller. Phase 1 of Lazarus remains on track. The subjects have exceeded all developmental parameters. Dr. Frost will be pleased. The name sent a shock through Olivia's system. Dr. Charlotte Frost was a controversial figure in genetics research, known for pushing ethical boundaries in her work on species resurrection and genetic engineering. 3 years ago, she had disappeared from public view after a congressional investigation into her company's research practices. And now, somehow, she was connected to the spirit bear cubs. Noah ended his call and began gathering equipment: syringes, vials, a small electronic device Olivia didn't recognize. She retreated quickly to her tent, heart pounding, mind whirling with questions and implications. Whatever Project Lazarus was, it wasn't a simple rewilding experiment. The spirit bear cubs weren't just rare, natural phenomena, they were something engineered. Synthetic gene, Noah had said. And he was planning to collect samples tomorrow, presumably without the knowledge or consent of Hayes, Diane, or Dr. Chen. Olivia faced a dilemma. Should she confront Noah directly, alert Hayes, despite her suspicions about his own involvement, or gather more information before acting? As she lay in her sleeping bag, sleep now an impossibility, Olivia made her decision. Tomorrow, she would follow Noah when he went to collect his samples. She would document whatever he did, and then, with evidence in hand, she would figure out who, if anyone, she could trust with what she had discovered. Outside, an owl called into the darkness. In the distance, very faintly, came the answering rumble of a mother bear, keeping watch over her cubs through the night. Whatever secrets surrounded their origins, whatever plans others might have for them, Olivia made a silent promise to the unusual family that had drawn her into this mystery. She would protect them, no matter what it took, even if it meant going against the very people who claimed to be doing the same. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that she was now entangled in something far larger and more dangerous than wildlife trafficking or unethical research. Project Lazarus had implications that reached beyond the fate of 2 unusual bear cubs, and there were people who would go to extreme lengths to ensure it remained secret. The owl called again, closer now. Watching, waiting, just as Olivia would watch and wait for the truth to reveal itself in the light of day. First light found Olivia already awake, her camera packed and ready. She had barely slept, her mind churning with fragments of Noah's cryptic conversation. Through the thin canvas of her tent, she could hear the camp stirring to life. The soft murmur of voices, the metallic clink of cooking equipment, footsteps on the forest floor. She emerged to find Dr. Chen preparing a thermos of coffee, his face drawn with fatigue. "Early riser?" he asked, offering her a steaming cup. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Too much excitement yesterday." Dr. Chen nodded sympathetically. "The mother bear is stable. I checked on her at dawn. The tranquilizers have cleared her system, and she's alert and caring for her cubs." Relief washed over Olivia. That's good news. Indeed. And with Zhao and his men in custody, the immediate threat has passed. He hesitated, then added, though I must say, this entire situation grows more puzzling by the day. Olivia studied him carefully. Did he know something about Project Lazarus? Was he part of whatever Noah was involved in? His open, tired face revealed nothing but professional concern. How so? She asked, testing the waters. Dr. Chen glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. I've been reviewing the blood samples I took from the cubs during their health check. Their genetic markers, there are anomalies I can't explain. Olivia's heart quickened. What kind of anomalies? It's highly technical, he said, frowning. But essentially, portions of their genome show signs of precision that's unlikely to occur naturally, even accounting for known mutations in the Kermode population. Are you saying someone altered their genetics? Olivia asked, careful to keep her voice neutral despite the confirmation of what she'd overheard from Noah. Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable. I wouldn't go that far, not yet, but I've requested permission to send the samples to a specialized lab for further analysis. He shook his head. Director Hayes seemed resistant to the idea. Before Olivia could respond, Noah emerged from his tent, equipment bag slung over his shoulder. He offered them a cheerful wave. Morning. I'm heading out to check the remote cameras. Should be back by noon. Olivia recognized her opportunity. Mind if I join you? I'd love to get some morning shots of the bears if they're active. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Noah's face before his smile returned. Sure, why not? The more the merrier. Dr. Chen looked between them. Be careful. The mother is still recovering, and she might be especially protective after yesterday's events. We'll keep our distance, Noah promised, already starting down the trail that led toward the bear's cave. Olivia grabbed her camera bag and hurried after him, heart pounding with a mixture of determination and apprehension. This was her chance to discover what Noah was really doing, and perhaps uncover the truth about Project Lazarus. They walked in companionable silence for the first 10 minutes, the forest around them gradually brightening as sunlight filtered through the canopy. Birds called to one another among the branches, and once a deer bounded across their path, white tail flashing as it disappeared into the underbrush. Beautiful morning, Noah commented, his tone casual. Perfect for wildlife observation. It is, Olivia agreed, matching his easy manner while mentally noting that they had passed the turn that would have taken them to the nearest camera station. Are we checking the eastern cameras first? Actually, Noah said, veering off the main trail onto a barely visible game path. I want to try a different approach to the cave today. There's a ridge overlooking it from the north that offers an excellent vantage point without disturbing the bears. Olivia followed, alert to every movement. The path grew steeper, winding through dense pine and spruce that muffled their footsteps. After another 15 minutes of climbing, they emerged onto a rocky outcropping that did, indeed, provide a clear view of the area below, including the cave entrance. Noah set down his bag and withdrew a pair of high-powered binoculars. Perfect, he murmured, scanning the scene below. They're out foraging. All 4 of them. Olivia raised her camera, using the telephoto lens to bring the bears into focus. The mother grizzly moved slowly but steadily through the underbrush, occasionally pausing to dig for roots or turn over rocks in search of insects. The cubs followed, first the brown grizzly cub, then the 2 white spirit bears, their fur gleaming like snow in the morning light. They're beautiful, she said, and meant it. Whatever their origins, the sight of the 4 bears moving together as a family stirred something deep within her. They're miracles, Noah replied, his voice suddenly fervent. Do you know how many species go extinct every year, Ms. Reed? How many unique genetic lineages are lost forever because of human interference? Olivia lowered her camera slightly, watching him instead of the bears. Too many. Exactly, too many. Noah's expression had transformed, the affable graduate student replaced by someone more intense, more passionate. What if we could reverse that? Not just conserve what remains, but bring back what's been lost. Like Jurassic Park, Olivia asked, deliberately keeping her tone light. Noah's laugh held little humor. Nothing so dramatic. But selective resurrection of recently extinct species, or genetic restoration of dangerously depleted genetic diversity, that's within our grasp now. He returned his gaze to the bears below. Those cubs represent something beyond ordinary conservation. They're proof of concept. For Project Lazarus, Olivia said quietly. Noah's head snapped toward her, eyes widening momentarily before his expression settled into careful neutrality. Where did you hear that name? Zhao mentioned it yesterday, said the spirit bears were part of an unauthorized rewilding experiment. She held his gaze steadily. But it's more than that, isn't it? I heard you on the phone last night, Noah, talking about synthetic genes and samples. For a long moment he said nothing, calculating. Then he sighed. How much did you hear? Enough to know those cubs aren't natural Kermode bears. They've been engineered somehow. And you're working for someone named Dr. Frost, not the University of Washington. Noah set down his binoculars, his shoulders slumping slightly. I do work for the university, that part's true. But yes, I'm also part of Dr. Frost's research team, have been for 4 years now. The same doctor, Charlotte Frost, who disappeared after congressional hearings into her ethics violations? The same Dr. Frost who was hounded out of legitimate research channels for daring to push boundaries, Noah corrected, a hint of bitterness in his voice. Do you know what she was working on when they shut her down? A genetic therapy that could have saved the northern white rhino from extinction. Instead, politics and fear-mongering forced her underground. So she created Project Lazarus, Olivia suggested, keeping her voice calm, encouraging him to continue. Noah nodded. A private initiative, funded by conservation-minded billionaires who understand what's really at stake. The spirit bears were our first major success, genetically modified Kermode bears, with enhanced expression of the MC1R mutation, plus specific traits designed to improve their survival prospects. Enhanced how? Olivia asked, genuinely curious despite her misgivings. Increased disease resistance, better cold tolerance, genetic markers that would make their fur less attractive to trophy hunters, a subtle modification that makes the white coat develop yellowish patches when the bear is killed. A hint of pride entered his voice. Humane enforcement of protection. And the grizzly mother? How does she fit into this? Noah hesitated. That was unexpected. The cubs were meant to be raised by their biological mother, a modified black bear with the Kermode gene, in a controlled environment. But there was an accident during transport. The mother was killed, the cubs escaped. By the time we tracked them, they had somehow been adopted by the grizzly. He shook his head in wonder. An outcome no one predicted, but valuable in its own way. It demonstrates the cub's ability to adapt and form bonds across species lines, another engineered trait working exactly as designed. Olivia tried to process everything she was hearing. So, Hayes, the Forest Service, they don't know about this? Hayes knows, Noah said grimly. He's been monitoring the project from the beginning, making sure it stays contained, managing potential exposure. That's his real job, keeping genetic innovations like ours from disrupting established conservation paradigms. And Dr. Kingsley? Noah laughed. Eleanor Kingsley isn't from the National Science Foundation. She's Doctor, Frost's right hand, here to evaluate the cub's development personally. Olivia's head spun with revelations. Nothing was as it had seemed. The traffickers were real, but they were merely opportunists who had stumbled onto the project. The conservation narrative was a cover for genetic experimentation. The only genuine elements were the bears themselves, a mother's devotion to her adopted cubs, regardless of their origins. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "What's the extraction timeline you mentioned last night?" Noah studied her for a long moment, seemingly weighing how much to reveal. "The cubs need to be relocated to a secure facility for the next phase of monitoring. Their genetic modifications are still expressing, still stabilizing. They need specialized care." "Separated from their mother?" Olivia couldn't keep the dismay from her voice. "It's necessary," Noah insisted. "Their biological implications are too important to risk leaving them in the wild." "They're not just biological specimens," Olivia argued, gesturing toward the bears below, where the mother was now showing her cubs how to dig for insect larvae beneath a fallen log. "Look at them, Noah. They're a family. What you're proposing is cruel, no matter how you justify it scientifically." Noah's expression hardened. "I understand your emotional response, Ms. Reed, but these cubs represent the future of conservation, proof that we can actively restore what humanity has destroyed. The mother Grizzly has served her purpose in helping them survive this long. Now it's time for science to take over." Olivia felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. "I can't let you do that." "You don't have a choice," Noah replied, reaching into his jacket pocket. "By this evening, Hayes will have arranged for the cubs' transport to our facility. Dr. Kingsley has already approved the extraction. And if I tell everyone what I know, Dr. Chen, Diane, Agent Vega?" Noah withdrew a small device that Olivia recognized as a satellite transmitter. "That would be unfortunate for everyone involved, including you." His voice remained calm, reasonable, making his implied threat all the more chilling. Olivia's mind raced. She needed to get back to camp to warn someone. But who? Hayes was complicit. Kingsley was part of the project. Diane and Dr. Chen might believe her, but would they act against federal authorities? As she weighed her options, movement in the forest below caught her attention. The mother bear had suddenly become alert, her massive head raised, testing the air. The cubs clustered behind her, sensing her tension. Through her camera lens, Olivia saw what had disturbed the bear. Figures moving stealthily through the trees, at least 4 of them, dressed in dark clothing, approaching the cave from multiple directions. "Noah," she said sharply, pointing. "Look." He raised his binoculars, then swore under his breath. "That's not our extraction team. They're not due until tonight." "More traffickers?" "Possibly." His forehead creased with concern. "Zhao must have partners we didn't identify." Below, the mother bear had positioned herself protectively in front of her cubs, rising to her full height as she roared a warning at the approaching figures. One of them raised what looked like a rifle. Without thinking, Olivia grabbed Noah's satellite transmitter and activated the emergency signal. "We need to help them," she exclaimed, already scrambling toward the path that would take them down to the clearing. Noah hesitated only briefly before grabbing his bag and following her. "This is a bad idea," he called after her. "We're not equipped to handle armed poachers." But Olivia was already racing down the slope, heart pounding as branches whipped past her face. She could hear Noah behind her, cursing softly as he struggled to keep up. They burst into a small clearing just as the first tranquilizer dart struck the mother bear. She roared in pain and anger, charging toward the nearest attacker, who fled into the trees. The cubs huddled together at the cave entrance, the two white ones nearly invisible against the brown one's fur in their fear. "Stop!" Olivia shouted, raising her camera and beginning to take photos of the poachers. "Federal research project. This area is protected." One of the men turned toward her, his face obscured by a camouflage mask. He raised his rifle, aiming not a tranquilizer dart, but what was clearly a bullet. Time seemed to slow. Olivia saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Noah lunging toward her from the corner of her eye, heard the mother bear's frantic roar as another dart struck her flank. Then, impossibly, a white blur streaked across the clearing. One of the spirit bear cubs, the larger of the two, had broken from the huddle and was racing directly toward the man aiming at Olivia, its small body moving with startling speed and purpose. The man swung his rifle toward the charging cub, but before he could fire, the mother bear was upon him, her enormous paw striking him with such force that he was thrown several feet through the air before crumpling against a tree trunk. The other poachers began firing wildly, darts and bullets, creating chaos in the small clearing. Noah pulled Olivia behind a fallen log for cover, his satellite transmitter clutched in his hand as he frantically called for backup. "Help is coming," he assured her, his earlier threatening demeanor replaced by genuine concern. "Hayes has a rapid response team nearby." The firefight lasted only minutes but felt like hours. The mother bear, despite being hit with multiple tranquilizer darts, continued to defend her cubs with fierce determination, driving two of the poachers back into the forest. The third lay motionless where she had struck him. The fourth had disappeared. When silence finally fell over the clearing, Olivia cautiously raised her head. The mother bear stood swaying in front of the cave entrance, blood matting her fur where bullets had grazed her massive body. Behind her, the cubs whimpered softly. "She can't stay standing much longer," Noah murmured, his scientific detachment returning as he assessed the bear's condition. "That's enough tranquilizer to take down 3 bears her size." As if in response to his words, the grizzly's legs buckled. She collapsed heavily to the ground, her breathing labored, but her dark eyes still alert, still fixed on her cubs with unwavering focus. Olivia couldn't bear to watch her suffer. Despite the danger, she moved from behind the log and approached the fallen bear, speaking softly. "It's okay," she murmured, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "You protected them. They're safe now." The bear's eyes tracked her, but she made no attempt to rise, no sound of warning. Somehow, Olivia thought she understood. Behind her, Noah had cautiously approached the unconscious poacher, securing his weapon and checking for identification. "Russian organized crime," he reported grimly, holding up a tattoo-covered wrist. "Probably working with Zhao's network." The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, Hayes' response team arriving at last. But Olivia's attention remained fixed on the bear family before her. The 3 cubs had ventured from the cave and were now clustered around their fallen mother, nuzzling her fur, making small distressed sounds. The grizzly's breathing was becoming more labored. Dr. Chen would need to arrive quickly if she was to have any chance of survival. "She's dying," Olivia said softly, tears filling her eyes. "She's dying to protect cubs that aren't even hers." Noah had joined her, his expression solemn as he watched the scene. "They are hers," he corrected quietly. "Biology isn't the only thing that makes a family." Something in his words resonated deeply within Olivia. She thought of her brother, of the crushing grief that had driven her to this remote wilderness, of the healing she had begun to find in witnessing the remarkable bond between these bears. "We can't separate them," she said, turning to Noah with fierce conviction. "No matter what Dr. Frost wants, no matter what Hayes has planned, this family stays together." Noah looked torn, the scientist warring with the human being inside him. "The research potential. Find another way," Olivia interrupted. "Study them together in their natural environment. Let them live as a family while you gather your data. There must be a compromise that serves both science and compassion." Before Noah could respond, the clearing was suddenly filled with armed men, Hayes's rapid response team, along with Dr. Chen and Diane, all converging on the scene with controlled urgency. Dr. Chen rushed to the fallen bear, medical kit already open as he assessed her injuries. Diane secured the unconscious poacher while coordinating with the tactical team to search for the others who had fled. Hayes himself approached Olivia and Noah, his expression grim. "Sit rep?" he demanded. Noah quickly explained the attack, while Olivia kept her attention on Dr. Chen's efforts to save the mother bear. She could hear the cub's distressed whimpers, could see the mother's eyes growing dimmer as the tranquilizers and blood loss took their toll. "Will she survive?" Olivia asked when Dr. Chen finally sat back on his heels, administering a final injection. The veterinarian's face was grave. "I've done what I can. Reversed the tranquilizers, treated the wounds, but she's lost a lot of blood and the stress on her system." He shook his head. "The next few hours will tell." "And the extraction?" Hayes asked Noah in a low voice that nevertheless carried to Olivia's ears. "Is everything in place?" "Sir, I don't think—" Noah began, glancing uncertainly at Olivia. "The cubs stay with their mother," Olivia interrupted firmly, rising to her full height. "All of them, together." Hayes's expression hardened. "Miss Reed, I understand you formed an emotional attachment to these bears, but there are larger considerations at play. Scientific considerations that you aren't privy to." "Project Lazarus," she said bluntly, watching satisfaction flicker across his face at her knowledge of the name. "Genetic engineering of endangered species. Dr. Frost's underground research. I know all of it, Director Hayes." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "Noah, what exactly have you told her?" "Everything," Olivia answered before Noah could speak. "And I have documentation." She held up her camera. "Photos, recordings. Enough to expose the entire project if anything happens to these bears. Or to me." It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Hayes studied her for a long moment, weighing options, assessing threats. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "The family stays together. No separation, no laboratory confinement. You can study them in their natural habitat, set up whatever monitoring you need, collect data, advance your research. But they live free, as bears should. And in return, I keep their secret, help document their progress even. But as a family, Director Hayes, that's my non-negotiable condition." The clearing had fallen silent except for the soft sounds of the cubs and Dr. Chen's quiet instructions to his assistant. Everyone seemed to be waiting for Hayes's decision. Finally, the director sighed. "Dr. Frost won't be pleased." "Dr. Frost isn't here," Olivia countered. "And if she truly cares about these cubs' development, she'll recognize that their bond with their adoptive mother is part of what makes them special, worth studying intact." "She has a point, sir," Noah interjected unexpectedly. "The cross-species adoption behavior is itself a valuable research subject, and the cubs' genetic modifications appear to be expressing naturally in this environment. We might learn more by observing them here than in a controlled setting." Hayes looked between them, then at the bear family. the wounded mother, the 3 cubs huddled against her massive form, 2 white, 1 brown, all equally devoted. "A compromise, then?" he said finally. "The bears remain here, under observation. A research team stays on site to monitor and document. Ms. Reed continues her photography work, with full disclosure agreements in place." He fixed Olivia with a stern look. "And not a word about Project Lazarus to anyone outside this circle. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Olivia agreed, relief washing over her. In the days that followed, the research camp transformed. Dr. Kingsley, or rather, Dr. Kingsley, Frost's representative, departed after establishing protocols for the ongoing study. New equipment arrived, sophisticated monitoring systems that could track the bears' movements and health without disturbing their natural behavior. Noah remained as the lead field researcher, his initial resistance to Olivia's plan gradually giving way to genuine enthusiasm for the modified approach. Most importantly, the mother Grizzly recovered. Her remarkable strength and will to live saw her through the critical period, and within a week she was mobile again, leading her cubs on foraging expeditions around the cave with only a slight limp to show for her ordeal. Olivia extended her stay at the cabin indefinitely, transforming it into a base for her growing photography project documenting the unusual bear family. Her images, striking, intimate captures of the bonds between mother and cubs, began to attract attention in wildlife conservation circles, though she was careful to present them simply as a rare case of cross-species adoption, the genetic truth hidden behind carefully worded descriptions. One evening, as autumn painted the forest in russet and gold, Olivia sat on her porch with Noah, reviewing the day's footage from the remote cameras. "Look at this," Noah said, pointing to a sequence showing the mother bear teaching the cubs to fish in a small stream. The spirit cubs are developing unique fishing techniques, different from both black bear and grizzly methods. They're creating their own hybrid approach. "Adaptation," Olivia observed, smiling as one of the white cubs triumphantly pounced on a trout, only to lose it in comical fashion. "Finding their own way forward." "It's remarkable," Noah agreed. Dr. Frost's genetic modifications enhanced their learning capacity, but this is something beyond programming. They're evolving their own culture in a way. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the bears' playful interactions on the screen. In the weeks they had worked together, a cautious friendship had formed between Olivia and Noah, one built on shared purpose if not entirely shared values. "You know," Noah said thoughtfully, "when I first joined Project Lazarus, I was so focused on the genetic science that I never really considered the emotional lives of the animals we were modifying. They were specimens, data points." He gestured toward the screen, where the mother bear was now gently cuffing one of the white cubs for wandering too far from the group. "But there's so much more than that." "Every living thing is," Olivia replied. "That's what I've learned from them. Life finds a way to connect, to form bonds that transcend the boundaries we think are fixed." She thought of her brother then, of the family she had lost and the unexpected healing she had found in this remote wilderness, watching another kind of family forge connections that defied conventional understanding. "Do you regret it?" she asked Noah. "Shifting the project like this, going against Dr. Frost's original plan?" Noah considered the question. "Science is about discovery, about following the evidence where it leads. Sometimes that means changing course when new information emerges." He smiled slightly. "And the evidence these bears are providing, about adaptation, about bonding, about family formation across genetic barriers, it's more valuable than anything we might have learned in a laboratory setting." On the screen, the bear family was heading back toward their cave as evening approached. The cubs romped around their mother's massive form, secure in her protection, their unique appearances, 2 white, 1 brown, marking them as different yet undeniably belonging together. "Family isn't about matching," Olivia said softly, voicing the lesson that had gradually taken shape in her heart over these weeks of observation. "It's about choosing to care for each other, despite differences, about protection and sacrifice and growth together." Noah nodded. "Perhaps that's the most important discovery of Project Lazarus, though not one we anticipated. Not how to engineer better bears, but how to recognize the profound connections that exist naturally in the world. Connections we humans often overlook in our quest for control." As darkness settled over the forest, somewhere in the distance, the mother bear called to her cubs, a deep, rumbling sound that carried through the trees like a song of belonging. The cubs answered in their higher-pitched voices, creating a harmony that seemed to encapsulate everything Olivia had learned during her time in this wilderness. Life was resilient. Family transcended biology. And sometimes the most profound connections formed across the boundaries we believed could never be crossed. In the morning, Olivia would photograph the bears again, adding to the visual record of their remarkable journey together. Scientists would study the data, measure the genetic expressions, quantify the behavioral patterns. But some things couldn't be measured or quantified. The fierce love of a mother for cubs that weren't hers by birth. The trust of cubs in a mother who didn't share their species. The miracle of belonging that had nothing to do with matching appearances. These were the lessons Olivia would carry forward from her time with the bears. Lessons about family and connection that had, in their own way, helped heal the wounds of her own loss. In protecting this unusual bear family, she had found her own path to wholeness again. And the bears, 1 brown mother, 3 mismatched cubs, would continue their lives in the wilderness, unaware of the genetic manipulations that had brought the white cubs into being, unaware of the scientific significance of their bond. They knew only that they belonged together, and that belonging was enough. In the end, perhaps that was the most important truth of all. As the grizzly disappeared around a rocky outcropping, Olivia made a decision that defied all logic. Instead of retreating to the safety of the cabin, she followed, drawn by a mystery that seemed to deepen with each passing moment. Little did she know that what she would discover in the next few minutes would change her understanding of the natural world forever. The forest seemed to close in around her as she crept forward, each step a silent negotiation with the wilderness. She could no longer see the bear, but the drag marks on the forest floor provided a clear trail. Pine needles swept aside, exposing dark soil beneath, occasional drops of blood marking the bear's painful journey. The morning light filtered through the canopy in dusty shafts, illuminating particles dancing in the air. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker's rhythmic tapping punctuated the silence. Rounding the outcropping, Olivia froze. The bear stood at the entrance to a small cave, her massive body silhouetted against the darkness within. The bag lay at her feet, and she was prodding it gently with her snout, making soft, huffing sounds that carried clearly in the still air. Something about those sounds struck Olivia as almost mournful. Using a fallen log as cover, Olivia raised her camera with trembling hands. The telephoto lens brought the scene into sharp focus. The bear's injury looked worse from this angle. A deep gash that could have been made by a bullet or a close encounter with a poacher's trap. Despite her obvious pain, the animal's movements remained gentle as she nudged the bag, trying to maneuver it into the cave. A sudden movement at the edge of Olivia's vision made her duck lower. One of the hunters had separated from his group and was making his way down the slope, closer to the bear's position. He moved with expert silence, clearly experienced in tracking. There was something deliberate about his movements that suggested he wasn't just a regular sportsman looking for game out of season. The man paused, lifting a radio to his mouth. Though too distant to hear his words, Olivia could see his expression, a cold determination that sent shivers down her spine. He checked his rifle, then continued his approach. Olivia's mind raced. Should she reveal herself? Create a distraction? The ethical dilemma tore at her. This was wild country, and natural law prevailed here. Yet something felt deeply wrong about this hunt, if that's what it was. The decision was taken from her when the bag at the bear's feet suddenly moved. Olivia's gasp was audible enough to make the bear's head snap in her direction. But the animal's attention quickly returned to the bag, which was now shifting more definitely. With exquisite care, that seemed impossible for such massive paws, the grizzly tore at the canvas, widening the rip along its side. What emerged first was a small, dark, brown paw. A cub. The bag contained a bear cub. But as more of the canvas tore away, Olivia's confusion only deepened. The creature emerging wasn't just any bear cub. Its fur was a startling, unnatural silvery white, almost luminescent in the dappled forest light. A spirit bear? Olivia whispered in disbelief. She'd heard stories of these rare genetic anomalies, Kermode bears, a subspecies of black bear with a recessive gene that turned their fur white. But they were native to coastal British Columbia, hundreds of miles west. Finding one here, carried by a grizzly, defied explanation. The cub wobbled on unsteady legs, clearly weak but alive. It let out a pitiful mewl that echoed off the rocks. The mother grizzly responded with a low, rumbling sound, nudging the white cub toward the cave entrance. Too captivated to maintain her caution, Olivia shifted position to get a better view. A dead branch snapped beneath her weight, the crack like a gunshot in the quiet forest. Both bears startled. The mother rose to her full height, nearly 9 feet tall, her roar shaking the very air. The cub scrambled awkwardly into the cave. Olivia pressed herself flat against the forest floor, heart thundering, certain she was about to die. But the bear's rage wasn't directed at her. The hunter had used the distraction to close the distance, and now stood less than 50 yards from the cave, rifle raised. "Got the target in sight," he spoke into his radio. "The package is confirmed alive. Moving in to extract." Package. Not animal, not cub. Package. The mother bear charged with surprising speed for her injured state. The hunter's rifle cracked once, twice. The massive animal stumbled but didn't fall, her momentum carrying her forward even as blood blossomed on her chest. Without thinking, Olivia raised her camera and pressed the shutter button repeatedly, the rapid clicks documenting the horrifying scene. The hunter fired again. This time, the bear collapsed heavily, just feet from her attacker. She wasn't dead. Olivia could see her sides heaving with labored breaths, but she was down.